Hi everyone, I hope you've had a wonderful week so far. And so to kind of begin, I'm going to start off with my initial reflecting on the activity that we completed in class on March 27th. I've actually done, in my undergrad, I've actually taken all of these tests already as a part of my social justice class. Just to kind of see if we had any biases towards certain groups or people or populations. And then we reflected on if we believed that we actually had those biases or not. And I have the memory of a goldfish, so I don't really remember what those results were. But specifically for these three, we completed in class. During this class, for disability, I received a moderate automatic preference for abled persons over disabled persons. Religion was a moderate automatic preference for Christianity over Islam. And lastly, age. There was a slight automatic preference for young people over old. For religion and age, I wasn't too terribly surprised because I am a Christian Baptist, so that kind of made sense to me. But I feel like I don't really have a particular preference when it comes to young people compared to older adults. In either situation, whether I was around younger people or older adults, I believe that I would be fine and not really care either way. So that one is kind of up in the air for me. However, for disability, I was slightly surprised. If you've had me in other videos, I mentioned in a previous one that I have had a family member who was a paraplegic. So I've definitely experienced hardships and struggles that come associated with this particular disability. And because of that experience, I felt like I would have gotten no preference, but that wasn't the case. I don't know if I really believe the test 100% just because I feel like I kept messing up because my fingers just kept moving before I even saw the picture. So I don't really know if I did it right or if I actually put my all into trying to not mess up. My fingers just would move before I could even think. So I don't know. But 2 out of the 3 were kind of accurate, so I'm not too sure how accurate or not these tests are. But it was very interesting to kind of do again. But after the discussion in class and about how many people's results related back to their own lives and experiences, I think back in the book how it talked about certain populations or races growing up around people who were just like them. For example, with my own results in life, I never really dug deep into learning about Islam. I never attended a church other than a Baptist church. And therefore, this concept of a person's environment sort of kind of shaping and affecting the person, I believe definitely plays a role in people's outcomes. Overall, even though I was a tad skeptical, and still kind of am, I do see the validity as people's outcomes were related to their experiences in childhoods as they grew. And, as we grow, our environments shape us into who we are today. So I thought that was really interesting to kind of see that reflecting in people's outcomes that they got. So for this question, I believe that there is often a stigma associated between socioeconomic status and race. For example, I've heard someone say in the past that Section 8 housing and low-income housing is for individuals who aren't white. And it really appalls me that people think this way and are that naive to think that there is no white person that has a low economic status. What's interesting, though, is that when the book talks about how much there really is a divide between the races and their socioeconomic wealth, and just how astonishing those numbers really are. On page 191, the author breaks down how inflation within economy affected different races' households. As a result, the typical black household had just $5,677 in wealth in 2009. The typical Hispanic household had $6,325 in wealth. And lastly, the typical white household had $113,149. That's quite a difference, and you can definitely see how certain resources and privileges and benefits one race has over another, and how that can affect many different aspects of their life. And then on the opposite end of that spectrum, another factor that stood out while reading that relates to this concept of socioeconomic status and other identities was white poverty. Well, I just talked about how significantly white households had wealth compared to Hispanics and black households. the concept of white poverty shows a very different element to this. Excuse me. And the term white trash is often tossed around to refer to these white individuals who are of poor socioeconomic status. And the author actually states how this term was invented by white folks with class privilege to separate themselves from people who were poor, who were also white. That's really interesting to me and something I didn't know before. And it's also interesting to note how even though these people were deemed white trash and they were still poor, they still had privileges over people who also were of poor socioeconomic status because they were white. The author ends this section by talking about how solidarity is becoming more of a thing in today's society, and they state on page 201 that, concurrently, the black and white poor must do work of building solidarity by learning more about one another, about what brings them together and what tears them apart. While these two identities of race and socioeconomic are very prevalent and stand out to me in our society, building that gap between races, I think, would definitely be a positive towards bettering our economy and kind of working together as a group to climb out of poor socioeconomic cycles that keep happening. And as the book mentions on page 251, the United States has a history of religious intolerance from its beginnings. An example of how religion can be related to other identities is the Muslim population. Especially after 9/11, these two concepts of identity have been directly related and even caused undesirable acts of violence and religious discrimination and oppression. Some people don't differentiate between these two identities and just decide to lump everyone together because they practice a certain religion or look a certain way. It's unfortunate that some people are targeted because of these identities, even if they are lumped into a group of people who might misrepresent their religion or their race. This is certainly a standout that I noticed in the book as well, and in our society as a whole. Thank you guys, and I can't wait to see what you all have to say.